Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board, including 4 Americans, has gone missing.
From the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Welcome, everybody, to the stream. You guys know what day it is today. It is Secret Science Wednesday. Secret Science Wednesday we got going on. I'm your host, Ashton Forbes. Today, we are going to be talking about zero-point energy once again. Why are we talking about zero-point energy once again? Well, because it's basically the backbone of everything, I've started to realize. It's the backbone of the videos that we were just watching and the intro here. It is the backbone of free energy, which is the logical conclusion of the science. And I think it's vitally important that everybody understand how it works. So hello, everybody in the chat. Thank you for being here early. I appreciate you guys. We have had 3 now back-to-back streams in a row. It's like the old days where we were streaming every day. Somebody in the chat was asking, I don't know how Ashton keeps up the pace. Honestly, I don't know how I keep up the pace either, to be honest with you guys. I've fallen behind on some of the other stuff that I want to be pushing out content-wise. But that's okay. And I also have a full-time job that I do 9 to 5 somehow, which I don't know. Basically, I work and then I take a nap and then I stream and I try to keep up. So I know I said we would look at paramagnetic oscillations. I'm going to save that for Friday because I think that's more in line with Free Energy Friday anyway. Instead, we're going to watch this video. Dr. Thorsten Ludwig explained free energy. This video we're going to watch today, guys, is incredible. It explains every aspect that we need to know from zero-point energy. Now, it's 9/11 today, so first thing I want to do is respect to the victims of 9/11. I know exactly where I was on 9/11. I was in college. I was I remember I was in math class when it happened. I was actually in Calc 2 with computing. I was in the computer lab, and I remember seeing the news reports that a plane had hit the World Trade Centers. And I said, I have to leave. I have to leave class. And I ran to my dorm, turned on the TV, and we watched the second plane hit the towers. And I sat there with this girl that was in my dorm. And I remember vividly sitting down there watching as the buildings collapsed. And then I remember sitting outside of my dorm, talking with my Texas friend, John, about how we wanted to go and fight back in the Middle East. I knew right away that bin Laden was potentially responsible. And the reason why I knew that is I had lived in Singapore and bin Laden was responsible for the USS Cole bombing. And I remember that the West was not reporting at all, really, like in the Western media about this guy. And I knew he was a threat. And then, and so we were talking about, we wanted to go to war, all this stuff, all the emotions that you get out of it. So today is an emotional day to remember all of that. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories about 9/11. I'm not personally a truther or anything like that, but I don't rule anything out at this point. I mean, when you've seen a plane get teleported away by some orbs, the depths of deception that are possible are practically limitless. So I don't judge anybody else for what their beliefs are on that front, but I do think that we should still remember that thousands of people died that day, thousands, and they're never coming back. Okay. So yes, the reason why we're doing the zero-point energy stream again is because it's truthfully, so there was a post earlier today that I just made a few minutes ago, actually about less than an hour ago, where another free energy advocate has mysteriously died. And somebody made the joke that we've moved up the list. Well, it's not that far off, to be honest with you guys. So it is really important that we get the information out there, that as many of you out there understand how free energy is possible, how it's related to 0-point energy, so that everything can live on no matter what. And I actually watched a clip of him, and you know what? We may even probably won't watch it actually. And everybody figures out that it goes back to Tesla. So, and for the record, I don't know the details of what happened to the guy. But people naturally realize that Tesla was right. Tesla was right. But a lot of people don't dig enough into the science to really explain how the science works. That's the big problem. And people also know this concept of scalar, which is really like a phase conjugation where we have our transverse wave and then you have an exact opposite wave. And what happens when they're perfectly in phase with one another? They cancel out. But there's nothing left. You have a scalar potential still left. And you can beam that scalar potential longitudinally. So this is a transverse wave. A longitudinal wave would be like a sound wave perturbation through the ether. So you can actually transmit energy through the ether longitudinally, which is essentially like invisibly. We can't see it. We can't even detect it electromagnetically, but we can still do it. And this is the part where Tesla had this all figured out. And the reason why that's controversial is because people don't understand that there is an ether filled with energy. And the moment you realize that there is, all of this stuff comes into play. So what do we call the ether filled with energy? Today, they call it the 0-point energy field, the quantum foam, the quantum fluctuations. But we just call it the ether because we're OGs and we call it whatever we want to call it. Okay. Hey, everybody. And also just a big shout out to everybody new who's been following. There's been another resurgence. We've seen these resurgences in popularity related to everything that's been pushed out, specifically the science. And I appreciate you all. For the people that are watching who are skeptical, I totally understand that as well. And that's the reason why I do the science streams. I love doing the science streams. I love doing these science streams because I love science. I love physics. And I have never, in my 41 years on this planet before this, ever seen a physics theory that solved all of the mysteries of physics, all the gaps we have right now in physics, dark energy, dark matter, where does energy come from? All of this stuff is all solved by 0-point energy. And then you find out there's this whole history to it that's just been out there. Like it's just, we even have scientific papers and scientists that have all figured this out. Like we can really map out the history of it going back 100 years, which leads me to my next point. Actually, before I say that, I want to say that I would never harm myself. I think it's really important I say this once again. I would never harm myself. I'm not walking around at night in any sketchy neighborhoods or anything like that as well. I think that it does protect me that I've been going on some of these podcasts and interviews. Also, please check out the interview I did with Emerald Robinson. She's awesome. I responded to some of the UFO community because there is obviously a connection to the UFO community with this science. It explains gravity manipulation as well. The UFO community has no idea. For the most part, they have no idea. You're going to hear some of them sometimes talk about 0-point energy, but they don't realize that 0-point energy is the linchpin to all of this. And they are also very, very obsessed with aliens, when in reality, they should be more obsessed with how gravity manipulation technology and free energy is going to change the planet. And this is why Stephen Greer had this figured out as well. But again, a lot of these guys, they don't dig enough into the science. And this is why they don't realize they can't explain it in a way where it can gain credibility. And then the next piece that I want to say is that I did talk with Clayton Morris of Redacted. We've been going back and forth a little bit. It sounds like we are going to set up another follow-up interview. I think I don't even want to do a follow-up on MH370, to be honest with you, though we might do like a quick, like, what's the update or something like that. We're trying to work it out behind the scenes to see how we would do it. I honestly just want to do it all about free energy and 0-point energy because I'm confident enough and I've learned enough that I can speak to it intelligently and I can take it to the next level where many of the other advocates out there have just say like, oh, free energy is possible. Cool. But like, I want like, tell me exactly how it's possible. Tell me who the scientists are that figured it out. And I can do that now. So I think it's going to be pretty awesome. And then one other thing that people say is, I'm going to actually bring this up. People say open source it. They say, oh, you have to open source it. this is very important. I want you guys to listen to me. Many people have already open sourced it. It doesn't matter. The reason why I stepped away, not fully, but a little bit from the over Unity with EtherTech, it's still there, but the reason why I haven't focused on that is because it doesn't matter if it's real. They've discredited real inventions many times before, and there is no standard of proof. There is no standard proof. You can't show it to people. You can have schematics. You show it to people. You can have schematics. You can do any of that. You can go on a tour on 47 states and show people and explain it, and they will still discredit you, and they will still say it's fake. In fact, they will not even review it or look at it, and they will demand that it's fake. They can even sue you, and they'll have a fake expert claim that it violates the laws of thermodynamics without ever even looking at the device. This is what you guys have to realize. You guys, if you think that all you have to do is open source it, you do not understand the levels of suppression that we are dealing with here. And that's the reality of it. I've literally shown over Unity device on my stream with a video with meters on it. And the answer was people said that it was debunked because it's 14 years old. That was literally people's real arguments. I'm not making that up. That's how stupid people are on this planet. So there is no way that you can just show people. That's not a possible way to get this information out. The only possible way is you have to teach people. You have to teach them. The only way this gets out, that people start to accept it, is when the paradigm shifts. And I will give you an example of how this is possible. So back in the early 2000s, George Bush was president. Do you guys remember the war in Iraq? You guys some of you may be too young, but the war in Iraq had a huge amount of popularity to it at the time. There was a huge amount of popularity. People were like, yes, we need to go to war in Iraq. We need to stop Saddam Hussein from building nuclear weapons or whatever. And everybody supported it. And then it turned out it was all a big lie. There was no weapons being built. All the evidence they had used was fabricated. It was just smoke and mirrors. And then now, if you ask people, or even if you ask people 10 years ago, you couldn't find anybody who supported it. Because what happened? The paradigm shifted. The narrative shifted. Human beings want to agree. They want to be agreeable. And especially in today's day and age of social media, people are completely brainwashed. Everybody just wants to fit in with the crowd, but they also want to be different. This is why the COVID scam happened. It was that, yes, there's a cold virus that's out there. No, it's not going to end the world. No, it's not killing millions of people that are out there. That was all bullshit. That was all bullshit. And the way that it happened was propaganda and fear was a self-perpetuating cycle. Right? Self-perpetuating cycle. And what we need to do is we need to reverse that cycle. When it gets to the point where people realize that 0-point energy is real and is possible, we will be able to reverse the cycle on people thinking that free energy is not possible. We will be able to reverse it. And the moment that it becomes self-evident that like Neil deGrasse Tyson is going, yeah, of course free energy is possible, everybody's going to flip their tune immediately. You guys are going to you're going to get whiplash based on how quickly everybody flips their tune and goes, of course free energy is possible. We have this huge 0-point energy field filled with energy that's out there. The way it will play out is exactly like this. There's going to be someone that is able to prove that the vacuum catastrophe, the question of, is there zero energy out there in space to absorb? No, there's a huge amount of energy to be able to extract. The moment this gets figured out, the first domino falls and everything starts to fall. And then people are going to go, oh, of course, we always knew there was this huge amount of energy to be out there. You're not going to be able to find somebody that disagrees anymore. And then this is like kind of the plan with, disclosure as well. You can see the writing on the walls. They're trying to leapfrog what I'm doing here. Like they're getting ahead of it. Now they're talking about warp drives and wormholes out of nowhere. You're like, what? Because the history is written by the victor. And then nobody's going to remember all this bullshit where like a year ago when I started this, everybody thought I was insane because I'm talking about warp drives and wormholes being real. But then you hear Lou Elizondo go on Joe Rogan or write in his book or go to Glenn Beck and talk about it. And next thing you know, people are going, oh, well, I guess maybe it's not that crazy anymore, right? Same thing's going to happen with free energy. Exact same thing. We're ahead of the game. Okay, so right before we get into this, because I don't want to go all night tonight, I do want to shout out Crypto Alchemist. I saw a message on Crypto Alchemist's YouTube channel that he was struggling right now. So if people go out there, please support Crypto Alchemist. He's been out here in this game trying to get this information out for a really long time. There's a lot of small content creators that have been trying to do what I've been doing, and they've just been getting ignored mostly. So I think it's really important that we support one another. I also want to support him myself. I'm just waiting for my paycheck to come in so I can give a small donation to some of these guys that need it. I've also just had a bunch of things that I've been paying for as well at the moment. So, okay. Let's see. Yeah, appreciate you too, man. He's been in my chat. Also, make sure you guys hit the like on this. Now, let's dig into this. So, Dr. Thorsten Ludwig. Now, when you watch this video that we're going to show here, I'm going to pull it up. You're going to realize pretty quickly this guy's not a joke. He's not in the woo or anything like this. I'm probably going to limit the amount of pauses that I put in here and the amount of commentary I can do. But there's some pretty big zingers on here. And I'm also going to be kind of learning at the same time. Let me see what we got. I've watched this, but honestly, you can't watch these videos enough. Now, this one's just called, I think, 0 Point Energy. If you're looking for it on YouTube, 0 Point Energy, Dr. Thorsten Ludwig. If you want to watch it later on, maybe I'll put a link in the description for you guys. Let's see if I can find this. I think you guys should be able to hear this. If you can't hear this when I start playing it, please let me know. We're probably going to play it at 1.25 speed. Oh, wait, what? How long is it? 56 minutes. And yes, the last thing I want to say before we get in this is, yeah, people will call you kooks. They do whatever. Like, that's just a defense mechanism for people that are frankly don't have the ability to think for themselves. So we just have to live with that, right? People are going to do that, what have you. And then, like I said, the moment that the paradigm shifts, you're not going to be able to find those people anymore. All those people that did that, they're going to delete their accounts on social media. They're going to pretend like they never said it. That's just how the world really works, sadly enough. And I think that a lot of the people that are out there, they do, like Alien Girl here, Good Morning UFO, she goes by now, deserves credit for the work that she's done. There's a lot of people on the ground floor, I've noticed, who put in the work. They don't necessarily get the giant interviews because they're not in the club or whatever, but they care. They're passionate about this stuff. And then with respect to the engineers and scientists, you're going to hear a lot of them get named in here. It's crazy how many people and engineers and scientists already passed away that had figured this stuff out that never got any credit for it. So I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I tried to take credit and be like, I figured out free energy, everybody. I figured out teleportation. It's like, no, like these engineers figured it out a long time ago, everyone. Okay. So let's do it. And actually, before I do that, I do want to address this question here. And this is, you can check out my live stream on Monday to listen to the long thing about this. But I do think it's important to bring it up a lot, which is, do you think that humans will be able to prevent this technology from destroying our complete existence? I don't know. I really don't know. I made a post about this last night as well. Robert Salas, he was one of the people I think he saw like UFOs shut down nukes or something like that years ago. I remember he was one of the first people in the UFO community that I direct messaged. And I asked him, would you still want disclosure if it meant the end of the world? If it meant that we would just make super weapons? Because I concluded early on that was the long and the short of all this. And he basically said that it is up to us to determine our own fate. And I couldn't agree more with him. In the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether or not we would destroy ourselves with this technology. Humans deserve to know anything that we're capable of understanding. And it's up to us. And if we end up destroying ourselves, then I guess we were not made for this universe. So this is the rub when it comes right down to it. And this is the reason why I push forward, despite the fact that I am personally, my opinion is that I'm certain we will destroy ourselves with this technology. I hope I'm wrong. And I want to try to do everything in my power to ensure that we change our perception and that we change our behaviors to ensure that we can harness this technology without destroying ourselves. If that means advocating for controls over how the technology is used or trying to get people to end wars or whatever we have to do, then that's what I will do. That's out there. 100%. 100%. Okay. Here we go.
Thank you very much for
Oh, you guys can't hear it? Okay, sorry. Thanks for letting me know. I wasn't sure if there'd be audio. Okay, he didn't say anything yet, guys, so don't worry. Let me see if I can fix this. Otherwise, we may just have to watch it in full time. Let me see. Or slow-mo or whatever it is. Problem is I have too many things open. Boy. Sorry, guys. Hold on 1 second. Thorsten Ludwig. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to pull it up separately. Hold on. Okay. You know what? We'll just watch it in normal speed. We'll watch it in normal speed.
pretty much all my slides are totally different than his slides. So let's see if this works. Yeah. Okay, so the title of the talk was the sea of energy that we live in, and that's like the main point I want to get across, that there's a lot of scientific and experimental and technology evidence that we actually are surrounded by a lot of energy and that we can use that. So here we see some heroes. That's Tesla up there, and down there is Morey. So they both emphasize this point of a sea of energy that we live in. Actually, they were not the first ones. Like if you go into ancient India and other places, even still the Greeks, they had 5 elements, not just 4, and the 5th was space, was energy that surrounds us. So, but then it got lost as we moved into Europe. So this is actually the very modern viewpoint of physics, that we are, these are the vacuum fluctuations that were said. Some people call it the vacuum state. But basically, it's a sea of energy of, in this case, light, photons, or electric fields on the left that surround us, that fill the space. And we will learn in what I have to say, what are the fundamental historic and experimental facts that support this viewpoint. So here's a book of T. Henry Morey, Sea of Energy That We Live In, very interesting book. And he came up with a very interesting device that brought out about 30 kilowatt. And
so here's our first person, right? T. Henry Morey, the Sea of Energy. So this was, I don't know how many years ago. This was like almost 50 or 70 years ago or something like this. So Dirac, we're going to hear about. We're going to hear T. Henry Morey, Tesla. These guys had already figured it out a long time ago. The big question is, why has science ignored this? Why has science ignored this? It almost feels like we were intentionally pushed away from this. The biggest thing that blew me away with this is that What all this science is out there, these accomplished scientists, they invented stuff like, and for the people who are like, oh, open source it, like you're going to see so many devices. It just, I don't understand how we've just ignored it all. Although I do, it's just that people are brainwashed and they just go, what I'm seeing is not possible. People are taught not to believe what they see with their eyes. They won't believe what they see with their eyes if the authority tells them, nope, this is not possible. Incredible, huh? I don't have any update on the debunkers. I don't know. They started getting active again. They took like a month off. They started getting active again now because I've started to get popularity again, which goes to show you there's a major disinformation campaign going on. I'm not saying all these people are agents, but there is absolutely a disinformation campaign. Some of them are just NPCs that are fighting against the system, they're fighting for the status quo. But it would not surprise me at all if some of them were like connected to private military contractors or other things. So that's what the government does. They outsource all their dirty work. And like really what they're trying to do is they're trying to discredit me any way they can. So you're going to see them attacking my character constantly, but they never can attack the evidence because the evidence is, I mean, the science is all real, you know? And this is what they've done to like basically every single free energy advocate that's out there. They say that they're a crank, they're a quack, they're a pseudoscientist. They say this stuff's not possible, but they can never actually address anything from the factual standpoint. Okay, here we go.
And, a lot of people witnessed his demonstrations. One of the key things is a tube, a very special tube. And, well, there was no input power, and he somehow managed to light up all these bulbs and to produce 30 kilowatts. A lot of people in his time, that was the 1930s, a lot of people witnessed it. It's one of a long story where it got lost and why we don't have it as devices. Maybe at the end of the talk, I can a little bit go into the social surroundings, why it didn't happen, that we have it today. This is a very famous quote from Nikola Tesla. Here he says, before many generations pass, our machinery will be driven by a power obtainable at any point of the universe. Throughout space, there is energy. This energy is kinetic, and so it is a mere question of time when men will succeed in attaching their machinery to the very wheelwork of nature.
Chat, listen to this Nikola Tesla quote. Nikola Tesla might have been a space alien from the future. Ere many generations past, our machinery will be driven by a power obtainable at any point in the universe. Throughout space, there is energy. This energy is kinetic, and so it is a mere question of time when men will succeed in attaching the machinery to the very wheelwork of nature. This is like 100 years ago. He had figured out like 100 years ago. The rest of the world is sitting here thinking like a telephone and a computer are like magic boxes of fire, magic firebox. And this Tesla has figured out that there's energy everywhere around us that we can extract. And we're not just talking about the energy of the earth either. We're talking about literally in the vacuum of outer space, there is unlimited energy to be extracted.
So I haven't seen many slides on Tesla yet, so I want to give you a little bit of an insight who he was. This is the famous Wardenclyffe Tower. But this is 1893 in Chicago. He developed the AC current, the three-phase that we still use today.
Tesla literally developed three-phase alternating current, chat. Like literally the power we use today, Tesla figured it out. Like people look at him like he's some like crank or like there's like some mythical figure. He like literally figured out all the science we still use today. 1893. Over 125 years ago, chat.
He empowered all these lights here. He invented many, many things, and he wanted to go on and build this Wardenclyffe Tower. But actually, similar to the times we are in today, there were some financial problems at that time, and so he couldn't finish it. And some people say it was suppression, but there are very interesting other stories that actually, he got a certain amount of money, $100,000, but the value of the money devaluated during the project, and then he asked for more. It wasn't promised, and he didn't get it. So he wasn't too diplomatic. And so there are different stories on how and why this project wasn't finished. But as you can see, the mere size of it, it was a full-size project and very serious what he was doing. And we still use the AC today. So maybe we can move on to his wireless power in time to come. So for me as a scientist, this is very interesting because this is in Colorado Springs, and that's where he discovered this transmission that he built then in the Wardenclyffe Tower. Here he analyzed what's happening during thunderstorms, and then the Schumann resonances, the electric vibrations of the Earth get excited, and he discovered that you can actually gain energy if you let power go through the atmosphere. So with this device here, the big shed, he discovered the secrets. So today there were also secrets. Up to maybe 10 years ago, people were wondering, how does the gecko stick to the wall? I don't know, many of you probably have been to Asia, and these little animals that crawl on the walls and the ceilings, and people were wondering, how do they do it? In this case, this big gecko here is walking on a glass, on pure glass. So there's no way he...
Okay, it's quiz time, chat. How does the gecko stick to the wall? Isn't this a great concept to think about? We see geckos on the walls and on the ceilings. I lived in Singapore. We would have geckos in our apartment. Like literally, there would just be like gecko, like lizards, that's like on the walls and on the ceilings walking around. How are they doing that? They're actually pretty decently sized. Why? How do you guys know how a gecko is sticking to the wall? I want to see. Oh, somebody figured it out in the chat. Casimir, chat. Casimir. If you've been watching my streams, chat, Casimir is extremely relevant. We talk about it related to free energy all the time. We also talk about it related to warp drives and wormholes. Turns out the same negative energy pressure differential that we use for a warp drive is the same way the geckos stick to the wall. He's going to explain it here in a minute.
Can hook to anything. It's very smooth. So how does he do it? And
here's the beauty. They don't have suction pads. They actually don't have suction pads. It's not like an octopus. That's not it. They literally use the Casimir effect. Pretty crazy, right? We didn't know this until like 10 or 20 years ago. We just figured this out recently.
And why am I showing you this? Because I personally am convinced if this free energy is real, then nature will be using it all the time already. And I think also we in our body will use it, but that's a different story here. This is bionics. It's watching nature, learning from nature. So in this case, the gecko actually is using, there are no hooks. If you look at the gecko, it's just a lot of hairs with a flat end. And we will learn in the course of the talk that that's a Casimir regime. It was a Dutch scientist who discovered that from these vacuum fluctuations, from the sea of energy, you can actually derive a force, which is called the Casimir force today. And the gecko in his feet is actually using the fact that if you have a large number of small flat ends and you stick them to a wall, you can have a lot of force. And that's how he's sticking to the wall. And then he just needs a technique to kind of roll his feet away from the wall to actually get it off the wall. Because he can, with his feet, and you can see here other insects are using the same thing, but the bigger the animal is, the more and smaller hair he needs to actually stick to the wall. So like a fly or something, they need much less hairs. So, and here on the right you can see bionic, you can see like a man-made structure which is doing the same thing. You can buy these things now. So we already went through the introduction into the topic, into the sea of energy. We will go on more into the physics, into the van der Waals force, into quantum theory.
So yes, technically, Casimir effect is a version of the van der Waals forces, which are static electric forces. However, the main difference is the Casimir force is happening at the macroscopic scale, which means a scale we can actually visibly see. Van der Waals forces are happening at the atomic scale, which we cannot see. This is a significant difference. Remember, an electron is like 10 to the minus 15. That means 15 zeros. So this is a major difference compared to being able to see something at the macroscopic scale. It's probably like 10 orders of magnitude larger. So that's the main difference in terms of those. Okay, let's just let him go.
It was pretty heavy stuff, and I will kind of overload you with a few formulas, so don't be scared too much. Yeah. So, and, but I do that to show you that the zero-point energy is actually very integrated into the modern framework of physics. It's not something unusual or something on the side. It is actually very much embedded into the framework of physics. We will learn about experiments that kind of show that this stuff is real. Okay, like that. Hope the sound is better like that. And at the end, we will see what can we do to actually utilize this energy and what are the technologies that are out there today that probably use this zero-point energy. So the van der Waals force, also discovered, I think, somewhere in Holland, 120 years ago, van der Waals, he saw that in gas, neutral atoms actually kind of attract each other, and he didn't know why, and he found out why, and it called the dancing charges called of technique, kind of induced from the vacuum fluctuations. One atom kind of jitters, and it induces an electrostatic jitter into another atom, and that kind of attracts the two atoms towards each other. And that's the van der Waals force. That's why neutral gases kind of hold together, and it's a very, very important widespread chemical force. And so Casimir, which I already mentioned, he was studying van der Waals forces like 50 years later and discovered some unexplainable aspects of it, and that's why he derived his theory from it. So let's move on. So in 1873, so quite before quantum mechanics and other modern physics, van der Waals found out the points I was just making, and then only much later people could explain what was actually happening. And only in the 1950s people really understood how the van der Waals forces actually come from the vacuum fluctuations, and that they're actually the same as the Casimir force, which we will learn later. Very important part in physics to understand this whole topic is quantum mechanics. So in 1900, in 1900 here in Berlin, Planck made a speech. He kind of first phrased that energy could be not continuous, but in chunks, in quantums. And from that, he could explain black radiation, meaning heat radiation that wasn't explainable before. And so the whole quantum mechanics came along, and here the name Nernst, he actually was the one who kind of took this concept of quantums to the next level, that also space itself, the energy in space needs to be quantized, called the second quantization. And it's a very important part in developing the zero-point energy concept. And what Maury also mentioned already is this uncertainty principle from Heisenberg. So let's see if we...
So right away, guys, you should be realizing that this is all related to quantum mechanics. This is why I've honed in hard on quantum mechanics. So Max Planck, you could say he's kind of the father of quantum mechanics, 125 years ago. first figured out we can explain heat radiation. And then Heisenberg comes in and says the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is that we can't tell where any particular thing is on any point. And that really we've got this kind of leads also to Schrodinger and this idea of the wave function and the double slit experiment is that when we really dig down to the smallest scales, things start to get really weird. We can't exactly say where an object is until we measure it. Once we measure it, then it exists. This also opens the door up to the holographic principle, which is that distance itself is an illusion that we're seeing, that we're rendering what we see in real time. And so people are going to say, well, do you think the universe is a simulation? I don't like the simulation word. It's holographic for sure, but everything is still real. We're still talking. We're still watching this stream right now. So let's keep going. I mean, this is wild though. I mean, you look at this, this is a major, like, you can break down the history of all this piece by piece, going back over 125 years, starting with Tesla, which is why I love this presentation. This presentation lays it all out for us, all out. It's undeniable. We've got dozens of scientists, some of the smartest minds in history, all leading up to the foundation of zero-point energy, which leads us to literal free energy. Also, hi, private military contractors. Hi, intelligence communities from our country and others. I hope you're enjoying our free energy presentation.
Get this laser pointer going? No. Okay. Anyhow, you see the one formula there, and you see that the uncertainty of position and inertia is kind of uncertain. So, but the same applies to other values, and in this case, time and energy also is uncertain. And from this uncertainty comes the point that energy can exist for a small amount of time, like for example, a green photon can exist for 10 to the power minus 21 seconds, and so a virtual photon can just come into being, live for this short amount, and then kind of vanish again. And this is exactly the same concept as the vacuum fluctuations, because a photon is also just a vibrating electric field. So this can come into being and go away. So these are just different descriptions of the same thing. Now, these people are important because in just after the Second World War, 1945 to 1950s, the quantum field theory, so the quantum theory of space itself was developed. And people like Schwinger, who got the Nobel Prize for this, they found out how these electric fields, how these...
Chad, I don't know about you guys, but I get goosebumps when I watch this. Like Julian Schwinger. Remember Salvatore Paez's interview? If you have not watched Hard Truths #1 with Salvatore Paez, the Schwinger effect and the Schwinger limit. And then we have Hendrik Casimir. So, like, man, imagine living in the 40s, like the smartest minds on the planet, Julian Schwinger, Hendrik Casimir. I mean, these guys were just geniuses, absolute geniuses. I wish we had this kind of physics today. Instead, we're like, we detected gravitational waves in 2015, as if like that's the first time we detected a gravity wave. Come on, man. Physics sucks these days, man. The roaring 40s were like the time when the physicists were like popping off. Like, holy crap.
Fluctuations, how that works. They came up with the formulas and how to calculate this. And then Hendrik Casimir, who was working for Philips in Holland, he discovered that you can use that to create a force. So this is again back to the basic principle. You see something, a harmonic
oscillator, EM cavity mode. Like now we're starting to realize that resonance plays a big factor here, right? We can see these resonant waves that we've got going on here as well. And this is the part where Tesla had figured out. We watched a video, I think a couple of weeks ago on Free Energy Friday, where somebody was like doing Tesla's experiments, and we were noticing that the wave, like when you look at this wave pattern that kind of shrinks, it wasn't shrinking, it was increasing. There was some type of some type of growth in the energy that isn't classically understood. And I was actually, there was a comment I was reading on, it was on Chris Leto. Chris Leto 2 years ago did a video about Salvatore Paius's patents. And then I was reading the replies in the comments of the video, and somebody pointed out an amazing analogy. It's like being on a trampoline. You guys have jumped on trampolines before? Have you guys ever double bounced somebody on a trampoline? That's what we can do with energy. That's how we increase the energy level. We can, instead of just bouncing up and down like this, you double bounce someone, and then what happens? Right? Double bounce them. This is what we can do with pulsed current. This is why you pulse the current. You pulse the current and you can, bong, increase the energy levels.
Oscillator, or a physicist would say a system. So in this case, the electron on a spring means a force field. In classical viewpoint, it can stand still. It can have no energy at all at one point. But with quantum mechanics, is something that Morey also mentioned, you cannot have that. At the end, you still have the 0-point energy. There is no standing still. It's the same thing at this energy time uncertainty. It means there is this jitter at the 0 point. 0 point meaning zero temperature in this case. So, and if you apply that to the right side, you apply it to that rectangular cavity, means to space itself, just empty space, vacuum or any space, and you still have possible electric fields, and also these possible electric fields, like light or whatever, they cannot stand still. They also have like a minimum, but you can also look at it from a statistical point of view, fields coming into being and going out of being, which is this jitter. So here you see some field modes, some possible vibrations in empty space, and these electric fields, they are not zero. Each of these modes, meaning possible vibrations, always has this jitter, yeah? So, and if the left side of this slide here, you can see that you can calculate over all space and all possible vibrations, and then you can come up with a number. And please note that the omega here, meaning the frequency, it goes with the third power of the frequency. So it really goes up when the frequencies go high. So the most of the energy is in the high frequency part of these vibrations. And this will become important if we apply this to kind of understand how can you use it. So it means very small space and very high vibration. That's where the energy is. In the low and slow parts, there's not so much of this energy. So here you can see these are Feynman diagrams, and maybe not all of you can read them, but basically you can see like the upper left one, you can see electron coming in and going out, okay? Like you can read from the bottom to the top, and from left to right is time. Time is from bottom up, and space is left to right. I have no time to go into full detail of this, but the thing is, these are the four fundamental interactions, the main forces. So, and in physics, if you have a line here which starts outside, like the E, the electron here, and goes out, that's a real particle which keeps on existing. But the photon in the middle, which is kind of starting and ending in the graph, is called the virtual photon because it's like this vacuum fluctuation. It comes into being and it goes away, and it lives for a short time. But this virtual photon kind of transmits the electric force. This is standard physics viewpoint. So
the way I imagine this with the virtual photons, right, is if we are in our ocean of energy, we've got energy that's jumping out above the water, and then it goes back below it. But if we can capture it as it jumps out of the water, now it's be a real photon. Now it's real electromagnetic energy. A photon is just an electromagnetic wave, essentially. So it's just a little piece of energy that we pull out of there. Somebody asked a great question up there. They said, can someone steel man the counter argument to this? And this is what blew me away the most. I thought there might be some actual counter argument to why there's not this huge amount of energy that's out there. You're not going to believe this, or maybe you will, but there's really only two aspects that people say. One, they argue that there's no energy to take from the vacuum, even though they know that there's virtual photons and all these, the 0-point fluctuations. They know it's there. They just argue there's no way to extract energy from it. They literally will tell you that. If you talk to like brain dead physicists that are out there, even PhDs, they'll tell you this because they're taught incorrectly. And this is called the vacuum catastrophe. The difference between the mainstream view that there's nothing to give and the real view is that there's this huge amount of energy that's out there. That's why it's changing people's minds is as simple as getting them to understand that the vacuum catastrophe, the answer is that there's a huge amount of energy, the sea of energy that's out there. The second thing they say is that, well, it violates the laws of thermodynamics. And when you hear someone say this, you know they're brainwashed. And guys, I don't care. I talk politics because I don't care what people think. I'm not going to be one of these people that's like afraid to say what I mean. It's the same bullshit that happened with COVID, where people are brainwashed into thinking that a mask, a loose-fitting piece of cloth over their face, is going to somehow protect them from submicroscopic viruses, one that's not even sealed. They think, oh, this is protecting me from a virus. Why? Because I was just told that. I don't even think about it. And if you tell them the mask isn't protecting you from a virus, they go, yes, it is. The CDC told me it is. This is exactly the same brainwashing that is used to convince people that the laws of thermodynamics say that you can't extract energy. And you just go, well, how does a windmill operate? And they go, well, but that's different. That's natural. The wind is natural. And you go, yes, the 0-point energy is also natural. It's all around us. It's the exact same concept. We have our system, our windmill. We enter wind into it, and now it produces energy. Without the wind, it's not producing anything. Our magnetic motors or our Casimir cavities, on their own, they're not going to do anything. But if you add the 0-point energy that we are literally staring at, that's been experimentally proven, now you have a free energy system. And it's not technically free, but there is unlimited energy. It's like if I told you, here's a teaspoon, go empty the ocean. You're never going to empty the ocean. In fact, the more you pull out, eventually that water is going to get back into the ocean through the hydrodynamic system of the water system.
I show this graph to show you that these virtual photons, they're not some side effect. In modern
and just, this is a great question. Sorry, I don't mean to pause so much, but is this equated to sonoluminescence? Sonoluminescence actually shows that this is real as well. It took me a while to understand the link. Sonoluminescence is essentially cold fusion on a smaller scale, and it proves that we don't need a sun to create fusion. It proves that there is this energy that's all out there, and so much energy that sonoluminescence can be possible in water. Because if it was true that there was no energy in the vacuum, sonoluminescence would not be possible. Where is that energy coming from? And the answer is that there's this huge amount of energy, and even on small scales, we can tap into it, which shows that cold fusion, low energy nuclear reactions, are also possible, and we don't need the temperatures of the sun. It's crazy, just like physics just ignores this, just ignores it. We have experiments that all you have to do is look with your eyes, and we can solve everything. But people refuse because they were taught incorrectly in their books, and they don't want to admit that they're wrong. This is something, too, that I shit on Redditors for, and they deserve it, is that they will never, ever in a million years ever admit they're wrong about anything. Even if you show them they're wrong, they will never admit it. Never.
Physics, they are the fundamental, what holds everything together, are these vibrations in space. Because in modern physics, people don't think in fields like electric field, which is just everywhere, because you can easily calculate that it would violate energy conservation law if something is everywhere and very strong. So they do this via these virtual photons. And there's a big mathematical framework called quantum field theory where you can calculate all this. And it's especially important, going to this graph, if you go into high energy physics and these colliders like in CERN, they need to do all these calculations to really understand what are these particles and what is happening. And this is from Feynman lectures, a very simple thing. You can see here how it works. Time is on one side of the graph and space on the other. And you can see like it shows a proton and an electron. This is just the atom in this Feynman diagram, and it shows how the electron is bound to the proton via these virtual photons. And you can see that in some of the virtual photons, there's like a little circle with some arrows. These are actually the pair production. Really, these are called higher orders. Okay, so with these.
Guys, Richard Feynman was a fucking genius, chat. Like imagine figuring this out in like the 40s. Because really what he's saying here is he's looking at the ocean of energy and he's trying to figure out how these photons, these virtual particle pairs are like bouncing out of it, right? Like imagine fish in the water and they're jumping out of the water and back in, right? And Richard Feynman had visualized this and understood all of this. And this is why when Richard Feynman supported Ken Shoulder's work on exotic vacuum objects, like people should have been like, oh shit. And to Bernie's point, this is also why they hate sonoluminescence. They hate cold fusion because it completely shatters the mainstream view that there's no energy that's out there. There has to be.
He's called the radiation correction. You can make all sorts of calculations of effects that, like the lamp shift and other effects that were not explainable if you do not take quantum field theory into account. If you just do the basic things, you cannot explain quite a few things. So this is a list of experimental evidence for zero-point energy. The lamp shift is...
Okay, so I'm just going to go very quick here, but here's the list. You're staring at the list that proves zero-point energy is real, because you're going to hear people go, zero-point energy is science fiction or whatever. It's like we've got Lamb shift, Casimir effect, electron charge, the fine structure constant, magnetic moment of the electron, magnetic ZPE near 0 Kelvin, which he's basically going to say is like equivalent to Bose-Einstein condensates. Like, why does helium-3 not become a solid at absolute 0? And the answer is there must be energy still there, right? And then when you start to calculate this energy, this is where we get to that vacuum catastrophe. You find out it's not 0, guys. There's a huge amount of energy out there.
A little shift in the hydrogen spectrum, so the energy levels of the hydrogen atom, if you apply what I just said with these higher orders, you can calculate that the energy is shifted a little bit, and you can very precisely calculate the energy of the hydrogen levels. The Casimir effect, I will talk quite a bit more in this talk about. The electron charge and vacuum fluctuations is if you, in space, and that's something that Maury also said, is that electrons and positrons, they come into being and destroy themselves in a very short period of time. That's called vacuum polarization. If you have a charge, like the electron charge, and kind of separate these electrons and positrons while they are in their small lifetime. And that actually changes the electron charge. And if you collide two electrons, they did that in Japan, for example, then you can kind of measure how these kind of dive into the cloud of vacuum polarization around each other.
We just heard the word vacuum polarization several times. Now, if that reminds you of anybody, it should remind you of Hal Puthoff's papers, zero-point energy fluctuations as or gravity as a zero-point energy zero-point fluctuation force. Vacuum polarization, we're talking about charges at the quantum level here. This is why the universe is electric. Truthfully, I don't even know all the arguments for electric universe. I just know the universe is electric because of literally what we're listening to right now. It's unavoidable. Once you start to realize we've got these fluctuations, and there's then these like positive and minus charges in this sea of energy in this equilibrium out there, you realize that if you really boil it down, the unification of general relativity and quantum field theory is electricity. It's electricity. Electricity itself is kind of a nebulous term as well. Electricity can account for charges, it can account for energy, it can account for current, voltage. It's a kind of an all-encompassing term that doesn't really mean any one particular thing. So that's why overall the concepts of electricity are what unifies the very small and the very large. And what this means is that the space as we see it out there is a medium of energy, of these quantum fluctuations that are out there. And if you were to add up all that massive distance of space, you're going to hit a infinite amount of energy. Infinite.
So these are examples where you can see that these theories that I was glancing at in this talk have a very strong experimental evidence. And it was actually the Lamb shift that triggered the quantum field theory. Because of the Lamb shift, people started to think, how could we explain this? And they found that if you take these vacuum fluctuations, this radiation background into account and do the calculations, then you can actually calculate exactly the Lamb shift. So now we come to the Casimir force. I emphasize this because this shows that you can convert the vacuum fluctuations, or the sea of energy as you like, into force, into something usable. And how does it work? Well, you see...
Sorry to keep pausing, but this is super important. The Casimir effect shows that just by taking two plates, we can get a force. And if we can get a force, this is 100% undeniable proof that we can extract the energy and we can use it. Because if you can get a force, then you can spin a motor, you can do whatever you need to do. It's just a matter of engineering at that point. I was arguing with a PhD physicist probably a couple of weeks ago. I forget what his name was, whatever. We don't need to drag him. But he was saying, well, yeah, the Casimir effect exists, but it doesn't show that you can extract energy. Yes, it does. Anybody saying the Casimir effect doesn't show you can extract energy from 0-point fluctuations is a liar. It's 100% undeniable proof. You can extract energy. The only question is, can you perpetually extract it? Because yes, the plates come together, but you need to use force to separate them. But it shows that we can extract energy from the vacuum into usable energy that can be used to power things. And this is important because then the problem is simply, how do you engineer it? We don't need, instead of two plates is just the simplest mechanism, right? It's kind of like saying, yes, we can make fire, but you can't get energy out of fire. And you go, yes, well, I just take the fire and I heat up water and then it makes steam and then I have the steam spin a generator, right? That's the difference. And that's literally what we do with power, by the way, literally what we do. So the argument that conventional physicists say you can't get energy out of the vacuum, that's like saying you can't get energy out of fire. Yes, we can make fire, but there's no way to get energy out of it. Okay, we'll just boil some water, take the steam, and use the steam to spin a turbine. Now you've got energy. So we just have to think about it from an engineering perspective. Don't use two plates. We're not going to use two plates to extract unlimited energy. We're going to use something else.
These plates here are metal plates, and on the right side and the left side of the plates, there's a lot of space. So you can have longer electrical vibrations, while in the middle, the very long ones are restricted. They don't fit inside, okay? So they cannot be there. You have less frequencies, less modes. So if you do the calculations, you can see that the virtual photons, they put like a photon pressure on the plates, and there's more from the outside than from the inside. So the plates are pushed together.
This is exactly the same concept as Brandenburg's concept of gem theory, where he says you can either have a light circles with a dark box, and then the lights are going to separate out. You're going to have a pressure outward, or you have a light box with dark circles, and then you have a pressure inward. With the Casimir effect, what happens? We're blocking wavelengths. We block certain wavelengths that don't fit between the plates. And what does this lead to? A negative pressure differential, which causes them to stick together. This shows us that we can manipulate the vacuum of space-time if we manipulate the zero-point energy fluctuations, which is what Hal Puthoff's scientific papers are all about. This is why we know Hal Puthoff has seen some floaty orbs. He's seen UFOs. And I'm not talking about aliens. I'm talking about gravity-defying stuff. You don't write as many papers as Hal Puthoff has that are consistent with quantum mechanics without having seen it yourself firsthand.
And this was discovered here in Holland in the Philips labs in 1947, theoretically by Hendrik Casimir. And here you see the same thing. Here you can see a little bit more clearly that the long vibrations don't fit between the plates and the force. So the force gets larger if D, the separation of the plates, gets smaller and smaller. This is a book I recommend, which shows all this, and it also emphasizes how the Casimir and the van der Waals force, these so-called dancing charges, which I mentioned in the beginning, they're actually the same thing. They're just different viewpoints. While van der Waals kind of looked at dielectrics, Casimir was looking at metals, and you have to do a little bit of a different mathematics to find that out, but it's in principle the exactly same thing. That's a modern viewpoint. So it took, I think, 70 years after the discovery of the van der Waals forces to actually see that it's the same thing.
And yeah, so with respect to those, Casimir is a form of van der Waals, like I said, but it's a macro scale level. I know for a fact Hal Puthoff knows who I am. I've never spoken to him personally. That's a fact as well. But I know for a fact that he knows who I am. I'm not going to go into more info on it, but you guys can just, figure it out. The same reason why I say hi to the intelligence communities and the PMCs who are watching, right? Like, this science is legit, and the people that know it's legit want people that are speaking to it, but you have to be careful on where you draw the line here, because they also know that this leads to the end of the world. Like, any physicist who looks at this and says, yes, there's this huge amount of energy, your mind immediately goes to, well, if there's this huge amount of energy and we can extract it freely, that means you can make like really anything. Like, you can make a force that's so powerful that you can destroy practically anything, which is why zero-point energy research has been banned from some countries. In fact, Sakharov himself, supposedly, I haven't found quotes, but supposedly he was actually against zero-point energy research after he figured out that it could explain gravity, because he saw the consequences. He looked ahead. In fact, I would argue that Oppenheimer, when he says, I am become death, destroyer of worlds, the same exact quote, this is the reason why I play it in my intro, is that he saw the implications of this. It's much bigger than nuclear bombs. Nuclear bombs are little firecrackers, those little things that you pop on the ground. We're talking about anyone on the planet being able to destroy the whole solar system with the push of a button. It's very significant. We shouldn't take it lightly.
So we have this here. This is another nice picture of the gecko feet. You can see how you have so many very, very small hairs, and the hairs are flat, and he sticks it to the wall, and all these flat places, they kind of do this Casimir force, and that's why he can stick anywhere to the ceiling and walls. So, and you can see here 2005, it's pretty recent that people...
So we only figured out how geckos stick to the wall in 2005, chat. And you realize now, how is it possible? The same way the Casimir force is possible. We just need a lot of surface pressure, and it needs to be on the very small scale, right? The smaller it gets, the easier it is. Because if we were to really look at the walls behind us or on the roof, if we were to scale down with a microscope, you're going to see it's not flat. There's differences in it. So the smaller you get, the more Casimir effect force, the closer you can get, the stronger the Casimir force is going to be. So then what does the gecko has? It has little hairs, these little hairs, and it needs as much surface tension as possible to stick to the walls. And then, like he said earlier, it's just a matter of how you roll off of it. And the moment now that you roll off part of it, enough of it, your hand's just going to come off the wall. This is how geckos stick to the walls. Casimir effect proves negative energy pressure. Somebody asked, what is pressure itself? Pressure is just an asymmetry. You have less here than you have here. The same way with the laws of thermodynamics that heat expands into cold. Same idea. Same idea. Less energy here means that the energy is trying to get into that location. So I have this zone here. If there's less energy in this zone, the energy out here is trying to get into this zone. And this really narrows it down. It's like energy can be heat. It can be light. It can be anything.
People found that out. Before, they were just wondering how this works. So now we move to the next phase. Now I'll show you a little bit how the Casimir effect is measured today. And that leads also to research how to use it for little machines. And it all goes into the so-called nano world, the nano machines, nanotechnology. And there are two different ways, modern ways, how to do it. One is based on the atomic force microscope, and the other is based on so-called tuning forks. Like every one of you who has a digital watch, a quartz watch, you'll have one of those quartz tuning forks inside them. So, well, this is the idea of the atomic force microscope, which was discovered in the 90s. And with that, you can actually, you have a small tip, which is only like 1 atom large, and you kind of scrape it over a surface, and then you measure with a laser beam the flexion of the cantilever, and then you get a signal which is related to the surface, and you can make pictures of nanosurfaces. You can have a resolution up to 1 nanometer quite easily, and it's very widely used in laboratories today because it's very simple. You can put it on any surface, and very quickly you can make a picture of it. So there are other ways of measuring the Casimir force. Here you can see they use a ball, and this is called the MEMS device, a microelectronic device. This little blue thing is only like a few micrometers large, and it's like a little balance, you know. And the gold plates, yellow plates on the bottom, like with the capacity of that area, you can then measure the distance, and by that way you can see here all the details of it. You can measure the Casimir force with this very, very, very precisely. So here you can see the real device, how it looks like. It's kind of etched from the full metal. So there are lots of details which I'm not going to go too much into. The main difference to the atomic force microscope is that was static. You kind of let the cantilever go down, and then you measure the force directly. But in this case, you let the whole thing vibrate. You let it oscillate on its resonance frequency, and then you can see a shift in frequency, and then you can measure the force by that. Here you can see it's quite important.
So if you're lost right now, I think quite a bit of this from going forward for the next like 15 minutes is him explaining how they measure the Casimir force. So this is already like he's getting, like if you look at the scales, like in this picture in the top right, we've moved away from using plates. That's what we used in 1948. That was 75 years ago. So they figured out they can scale this down to like literally the size of an atom. And when we're talking smaller than your nail here, right? And they use a ball, and they can still measure the Casimir force with this. And what you're going to find here in a second, he's also going to explain how they can use a tuning fork, because imagine a tuning fork vibrating. Well, if I put the tuning fork next to a plate, the tuning fork is going to experience the Casimir effect. And what's going to happen? This shift that you see, this frequency of my hand shaking, it's going to change. It's going to go faster. Why is it going to go faster? Because the Casimir force is trying to force that tuning fork towards the plate. So if I just hold the tuning fork over here, it's going to vibrate a little bit. Let's say it vibrates like this. This is the frequency, right? You can measure the frequency. Now, if I put it next to a plate, what's going to happen? It's going to increase because it's trying to touch the plate because of the Casimir effect. This is how they measure it. So how do they measure it? They measure the difference in the frequency. The slower it's moving, the lower the frequency. You put it next to the plate, It increases, higher frequency. This is how they measure the Casimir effect. Now, this should give you some ideas of how we might even be able to potentially extract energy using it, especially when you start to think about stuff like Casimir cavities now as well. Oh, sorry. The last thing I want to say is that you realize too, like with the gecko, it's not even a matter of scaling it up. It's a matter of scaling it down because the force increases the smaller you get. So we actually want to make it as small as possible. And then we maybe like build it up into like an array, for example, where we make a small, tiny little microchip that is doing what you see in the top right up there. And then we stack the microchips on top of each other. And now we're increasing the force of that, and we're getting a very powerful relative force at a very, very tiny scale. Pretty cool. What is negative energy then, chat? What is negative energy? Negative energy is not an exotic substance. Remember, space is not empty. We're in this ocean of energy. The waves are gravity. These waves are gravity. So what is negative energy? Negative energy is just us extracting. We're lowering the sea level of the energy. When we lower that sea level, you're creating a negative pressure differential, negative energy. This is what people don't understand, but it's so simple. Negative energy is not an exotic substance at all. It's just a matter of looking at everything around us where it's in an equilibrium state. Reduce the equilibrium, and you are producing negative energy in the form of pressure.
Roughness of the materials, because we kind of want to bring the...
Sorry, last thing is that, so since we look at negative energy like that, if I remove the energy in front of me, the 0-point fluctuations in front of me, and I reduce that equilibrium down, now there's going to be a pressure, just like we saw in the Casimir effect. What's going to happen to me? I'm going to get pulled forward because the energy behind me is going to try to move into that cavity, into that empty cavity that doesn't have the 0-point fluctuations. It's going to move me forward into it. That is how warp drive really works.
Ball next to the flat area in, let's say, 10 nanometers, 50 nanometers, and if your roughness is 50 nanometers, which is actually optically flat. If you have the feeling it's super flat, it's like 50 nanometers flat, the roughness. So you have to go beyond that to go closer. And that affects the whole thing. You will see in a little while I'm going into these details of roughness and so, because if we actually want to make machines, these things become important. And so here you can see the pictures usually taken with an atomic force microscope here. On the roughness, well, this goes into another way. This is now the quartz tuning forks, which what I personally like about it is, let's see here, these tuning forks you can buy for like 70 cents, you know, but then you can make a device out of it where you have a atomic resolution, you know, like 1 nanometer resolution out of a 70 cents device. I kind of like this. So anyhow, you have to put in a lot of work to get this doing. So here is one, again, the cantilever thing. Why do we use a sphere and a flat? Well, the thing is, people found out that it's very difficult to have two flat surfaces and bring them very close to each other. The alignment is a big problem, you know, so it's much easier to use a sphere. You don't have to align it. Any way you approach it to the flat area, you will always get a very small separation. And so all the people I know who are successful in measuring the Casimir force have done it with a sphere and a flat. Some Italians, they are still trying to use a flat arrangement, which gives you more power. You kind of lose one dimension. You lose like 7 orders of magnitude in your force if you do this, but still it's easier and people do it like this. Here you can see
So sorry, this is probably going over your head a little bit. I kind of explained some of it, is that they use a ball, and what he's going to say here is that, well, you can use a ball, but the problem is then the ball, if it gets stuck, now you've got to pull the thing apart, right? And it's prone to mechanical stress and then can break. Instead, you use a tuning fork and you just measure the frequency and it's less prone to stress. Somebody said regarding the warp drive thing. So they say, well, if that's true about removing the 0-point fluctuations, somebody also mentioned the point about a laser. So what is the laser doing then? A negative energy laser. The negative energy laser is essentially pushing out the frequency, the wavelengths that we don't want. If you can push out all the wavelengths, squeeze the wavelengths out, right? Squeeze, like imagine you're in a sea of people at a concert and you got to squeeze your way through. It's the same concept. You squeeze your way through and you make a path, and then your object falls into the path. And I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but you can now imagine that with the warp drive, the simplest way to build this then is using a ball of plasma. We don't want people inside of it. We just want a ball of plasma itself that is itself going to create a negative energy pressure. We don't want a craft inside there. That's more complicated. But inertial mass reduction for a transmedium craft. Salvatore Pais' patent, if you look at it, you'll realize what does he do to get around this problem? Instead of just having a ball of plasma, which is the simplest way to do it, and you can make your warp drive that way, you create a cavity around your object, a cavity. So you have an empty area around it, and then you put your plasma in the cavity. And what does that do? It separates everything that's inside the cavity from everything that's outside the cavity. This is also why people say, like David Grush said, that they go into one of these crafts, these UFOs, and it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside because you're literally messing with space-time. And since distance is an illusion, that might actually be possible. You create a plasma harmonic kind of cavity around your craft, and now you can have an actual craft inside of your plasma. And if people are looking at it from the outside, they don't even see the craft. They just see the plasma. They see the cavity around it. This is also potentially why, with the right nano structuring of the metamaterial, you have your bismuth, magnesium, bismuth, zinc. You have your layering. You're creating a situation where you're creating an effect that's different on the outside than an effect that's different on the inside. Still has some complications, but there you go. But this is also why I think that the plasma orbs in the MH370 video are orbs, because the simplest version of using this is just a sphere of plasma that's coherent without anything inside of it at all. When you start to get to like UFOs and flying saucers, that's much more complicated to create this kind of like cavity in there. That takes a lot more engineering and materials capability.
A picture from my lab where I did this. Here is this watch and this tuning fork in this watch. So what I do is I cut open this cylinder and then I get out these tuning forks, and if you let them vibrate and you can measure a force in the region of piconewton with it as a change in frequency, because they're very, very precise, very sharp resonance. So that's why it's possible. And here you see somebody who made atomic resolution with the quartz tuning fork setup. So it's there are a few reasons why this is better. Actually, very practically, if you use the cantilever, the silicon cantilever, it's more easy because you directly measure the force and you can buy the equipment more readily. But this cantilever is too soft. If you come to the flat surface, usually what happens is it goes bang. It's drawn to the surface, so you cannot really keep a close distance because the force gets too large and the ball just sticks to the flat, and then you kind of have to bend it back and break off the cantilever. And so if you use the tuning fork, it's much more stiff, so you can approach closer, and that's why it's.
There's another concept. So he just explained the tuning fork thing that I literally just told you guys. Phase shift. So it took me a minute to figure out what phase shift is. You're staring at pictures of phase shift right here in these graphs. When you see the same pattern, but it's set offset a little bit, that's a phase shift. This is the same thing as three-phase power. You have this sinusoidal wave, right? Transverse wave. And you can have a wave that's offset. So we have one wave going like this, and we have one wave a little bit offset from it. Just like you see in these graphs. That's the phase shift. So what do? We have our phases come together. That is coherence. So if you guys watched the Cosmic Summit, if you guys were watching the live stream, what was that woman's name? She was like putting together these harmonic, coherent shapes. And what she did was when she got to a specific frequency, the phases came together, and then you would see these shapes get formed or what have you. And when it was out of phase, what would happen is it would look like it's kind of jittery. It looked kind of fuzzy, right? That's the same concept here. And then how does phase conjugation come into play? Now, what does phase conjugation mean? Now it's obvious what phase conjugation means. Phase conjugation means taking those waves that are all the phases are offset and squishing them together so that they're coherent into one phase. And then if you want to have a phase conjugate mirror, what's happening? We have our one phase wave. We have the opposite wave, exact opposite. And then what's our sum total? Nothing. Nothing. So you can either amplify the power of your phase or you can just cancel it out entirely. And what is Hal Puthoff's communication device patent? Basically canceling out the electromagnetic wave entirely, and you're left with the scalar potential. This is the basis for scalar physics.
Working, he can see the physics, how you can actually measure a force by changing a frequency. I'm not going too much into the details of it, but here you can see the different vibration modes of and up there you can see the basic setup. You bring the tuning fork close to your sphere, then you have again this Casimir regime, this force, and the force will change your frequency a little bit, and you can measure that here. You can either use the phase shift or you...
Wait, you have an interview coming up with her? Yo, Bernie, send me that interview. Maybe even let me come in there and talk to her. Because, like, I told her in person. She doesn't even understand. Like, it's like the gray bearded man situation. She doesn't even understand how important what she's discovered is. When I was listening to her talk, I was like, I don't think you even realize, like, you are broaching on free energy and you don't even understand. Like, she visually understands the significance, but she doesn't get, like, the application for it. And I meant to email her because she's very smart. Like her phase conjugation stuff that she's doing with sound, she's not just pretty, but like she also is really on to something that's important when it comes to energy, for sure. Sheila, you guys are definitely little stalkers too. All of you guys are like totally had her name down. You guys crack me up, man. Sheila Ram and Nathaniel, bro. I met Nathaniel in real life. He's a good guy, man. Real good guy.
You can use the change in amplitude of your force. Here is some pictures from my lab where I actually did this, and here's some more details on how you calculate the stiffness, the K. And this is my atomic force microscope where I do these experiments with. It's a setup where I can evacuate everything, so it's more precise than doing it in air. So this is all from the lab, the setup there. Yeah.
What force are you actually measuring?
Well, the Casimir force. Earlier,
That's a homemade force in a way. What kind of a physical force are you measuring?
well, quartz tuning force. This is actually how you can measure.
Sorry, I skipped ahead because somebody randomly asked a question in the middle of this presentation. We're going to skip ahead. He's basically talking about the tuning fork here and how they're measuring the Casimir force here. I think he goes into something else, but it's maybe mostly about this. We'll see. I want to learn more.
The frequency change. You excite your tuning fork very precisely on a certain frequency. You use a lock-in amplifier, and then with a computer you can scan through the different frequencies and kind of see where the amplitude is higher and lower, and if you see a shift then you can calculate the force from that. So some more pictures on how it's actually done and the equipment used. And this is what I was saying, that it's a very sharp resonance. And here the resonance was measured. And you can see that it's 316 millihertz on a 32 kilohertz signal, which means that the quality of the resonance is 1 million. So
yeah, guys, we are beyond over the target. I'm going to switch to full screen mode. We're beyond over the target. Like, the people that thought this wasn't going to take off vastly underestimated my investigative capabilities and my intuition when it comes to physics and science. Like, we have nailed it. We are hitting the bullseye over and over and over with this stuff. Like, this is it. And 0 point energy, what we're looking at right here, explains it all. The other question I wanted to address, I'm looking for it. I think my intuition could be wrong, that Alcubierre drive is a little bit incorrect. We don't need to expand space behind us. All we need to do is remove the 0 point fluctuations in front of us. That's where I think Alcubierre might be a little bit off, which, no disrespect, 1994 to come up with the Alcubierre drive, genius. But when you look at it, like, all we have to do is squeeze out the 0 point fluctuations in front of us, right? We have to take our sea of our crowd of people, and we just have to split them like Moses splitting the Red Sea. Then we're going to fall into it. We don't need to expand space behind us. The moment we remove the 0 point energy in front of us, we're going to fall into it, right? And that's exactly what we see with the orbs. That's exactly what we see. And again, this is one of those situations where it's the difference between theory and then what you see visually right here. And notice as well, the black lines behind the orbs, they seem to start to dissipate very quickly. Why are they dissipating very quickly? Because the space itself is coming back. It's the space, like, it's like if you take some water out of the ocean. It's not like you're, for a split second, you're going to be able to see the divot in the ocean, but then the water is going to come and it's going to fill the void right away. Same idea with space itself. So you can split the crowd, but the moment you go into that, the crowd closes up behind you. That's what you see happening right here with these orbs as well. These videos are the most important videos in the history of the world, and I'm not joking. These are the most important videos in the history of the world. There's no way these can be fake just based on this, because you would have to know so much about 0 point energy just to create these videos. And then you would also have to be like showing where the theories of Alcubierre warp drive got it wrong. These videos not just prove that warp drive is possible, they prove the parts of the theories that didn't quite get it 100% correct. Absolutely incredible. I love watching these videos.
you can see that the resonance is very sharp, and if it's so sharp, then you can measure a very small force that's connected. So here we again go into the roughness of the materials used, because we have the ball which is coated with gold, and you have the other surface, and it's important how the roughness is. We will soon do some calculations on how much energy can we actually derive in a Casimir regime, yeah? And it's important how close we can get the metals or whatever objects together.
So keep in mind, he's talking about the roughness matters. Why? Because I just told you guys, when you use the microscope on the wall, it's not really flat. It just looks flat to us at the macroscopic level. But if you were really to go to the microscopic level, you're going to see little divots in there. And that's what he's showing here with these images. This is why it's important for the gecko. The gecko, it's not a matter of suction cups, not at all. It's little tiny nano hairs, because you need to get the nano hairs as close as possible on the atomic level to the material. That's what causes, because the Casimir effect increases exponentially. Why does the Casimir effect increase exponentially? Coulomb's law. Coulomb's law says the force increases exponentially as the distance collapses. Exponential increase. This is also, side note, proof of how the vacuum catastrophe, the answer is the large amount of energy. The Casimir force could not be this strong if there was no energy to give. The Casimir effect is way too powerful for there to be nothing there.
So, well, this is some notes on these experiments that I did, and I can report that the both ways of using the silicon cantilever and also the Casimir force measuring by the quartz tuning fork, both is possible. They have their pros and cons, and don't think it's so important here to emphasize, which I already said, the stiffness, which is a very important part of it. So why am I doing this, you might ask? And I think in studying this, I'm using it as a sensor to kind of see if by any means we can make a difference in the zero-point energy. Because if we have a difference, if we have an area with more and a difference with less zero-point energy, then it's like having different pressures in water, you know. Then we can make devices or machines out of it, or can understand how free energy technologies, machines that we will see in a little while here in my presentation.
What did he just say? If we can make a pressure differential, if we can, even on a small scale, have more energy over here than there is over here, what's going to happen? You're going to have the energy over here is going to try to get to this energy over here. This is gravity. This is what gravity is. And if you do this, we can create little machines that can use that force. And even if it's a small scale, then becomes just a matter of scaling it down and then scaling it up with an array of microchips. And we've been doing this for 50 years on other technologies. Why can we not do it with this? Like, this is, guys, I'm giving you guys the secret sauce, so to speak, on quote unquote free energy. So anyone who doesn't think free energy is not possible, people that think free energy is not possible have no idea what they're talking about. They do not understand zero-point energy.
How they can actually be understood with this quantum field theory concept. Another thing that I lately work on, which I want to emphasize here, is the connection between quantum field theory and magnetism, and also permanent magnetism. And the thing is, if you go into the quantum theory, after the basic quantum theory that I showed you a few things about, there comes the relativistic quantum theory. If you take Einstein's quantum theories into account, you have to kind of modify the very simple Schrödinger quantum mechanics and come to the so-called Dirac equation. And if you do that, then you can actually calculate that the electron needs to have a spin. And this spin of the electron, is actually connected to the magnetic moment, the magnetic force field of the electron. And in modern viewpoint of physics, we think that a permanent magnet, like a ferromagnet, is actually an alignment of many spins of electrons.
Wow, what did you just say? A ferromagnet, a permanent magnet, is just an alignment of the spins of the electrons. And what are the electrons doing? They're creating a vortex. So basically, you're creating an alignment of all of the electrons. That's what a permanent magnet is just an alignment of spins of your electrons. And when you look at it from that perspective, you go, of course you can make a free energy device out of a magnetic motor. In fact, I would argue magnets might be required to pull it off, at least at the macroscopic scale. Casimir cavities are another great way. But for me, if I'm looking at a free energy device, I'm looking for magnets, because what he just said there explains how the magnetic moment is now connected to extracting energy from the environment, from the ether, from the zero-point energy fluctuations that are out there.
So here on this slide, you can see that there is, in this formula, there is a connection between the spin of the electron and its magnetic moment. But the thing is, if you do the calculations and you do it a little bit classical, you will come that the G there, the little g, should be 1. But if we do the measurement, it's 2 point and then something. So 2.023 and so on. So with the Dirac equation, I'm not sure if I have it on the next slide, with the Dirac equation, you can actually derive that it's 2. But in reality, if we measure it, and Demelt, he measured a single electron in a trap, and he found out that it's the number that I showed you here. So the rest can be explained and calculated with quantum field theory, meaning the interaction with the radiation field, with these virtual particles, with these fields that we call zero-point energy.
So if we do the Dirac equation, we think that we should get to a number of 2 for G in the mathematical equations, but we get actually in reality a number that's a little bit higher than 2. What's the difference? The difference is the zero-point energy field that's out there. So what is the value of the C of energy? The difference between the 2 and the actual number. And then you take that difference and you calculate over the vastness of outer space, and you realize we're dealing with an infinite amount of energy. It's not just like a tiny bit more. It's like a shit ton more. So if I go back just like about 10 seconds here. Oh, wait. Right there. So you see that number is not just 2 at the bottom, it's 2.023, which you would say, oh, it's only 0.023 more. But then you have to realize how huge outer space is. If that number, even if that number is like 1/1,000,000th bigger than 2, that's still essentially infinite energy. This difference between what we experimentally collect and the number that we would expect is 2 makes all the difference in the world. It says the amount of energy that's out there, it's massive. The vacuum catastrophe is not nothing. It's a huge, huge, huge amount of energy, infinite energy.
So with the Dirac equation, I'm not sure if I have it on the next slide, with the Dirac equation, you can actually derive that it's 2. But in reality, if we measure it, and Demelt, he measured a single electron in a trap, and he found out that it's the number that I showed you here. So the rest can be explained and calculated with quantum field theory, meaning the interaction with the radiation field, with these virtual particles, with these fields that we call zero-point energy, that actually shifts that magnetic moment to the value that you see here. And you can calculate that. For physicists, this is important. If you can have an experiment and then you have a very large, big theory and you can calculate exactly the number on many digits, it kind of gives confirmation that, yeah, we can actually do something with it and that it's a valid theory.
I'm going to answer a MH370 question real quick. What happened to the passengers? The truth is I can't know for sure. Nobody can know for sure what happened to passengers. I don't have any psychic powers, but if there was a fire on board MH370, it's very unlikely that the passengers survived. Lithium-ion battery fires are extremely toxic, and the smoke will put you to sleep after just like 1 to 2 inhalations. It's that dangerous and that deadly. So we don't know for sure. I pray, literally, that some of them survived, but my heart tells me it's unlikely that they did. And that's probably part of the reason for the cover-up. Probably part of the reason why we're not finding pictures of passengers that were out there and be like, oh, this person looks just like somebody who's on board MH370 is because they didn't survive. So there you go.
And for us here, I think it's important to understand that any magnetic motor or so forth, there is a very deep connection between magnetism and zero-point energy. So yeah, go ahead and build a magnetic motor. It's possible to draw this energy just using spins of electrons and permanent magnets.
Hello, debunkers. Oh, yeah, magnetic motors aren't possible anymore? Well, why don't you go argue with Dr. Thorsten Ludwig and you tell him that magnetic motors aren't possible? It's possible to get this energy using magnets because there's a direct connection between a permanent magnet, which is the alignment of spins of electrons, and the zero-point energy fluctuations. Red Collie was actually recently on Twitter doing experiments where he's spinning motors or magnets around, and you're seeing anti-gravitational effects from the spin. If you just hold it there, nothing happens. You spin it, and all of a sudden the magnet shoots up. That's energy. That's work. The moment you see a force can be turned into usable, workable energy.
So here's like a graphic description of what I was talking about for those who like pictures more than formulas. Here you can see the electron, the ball with a spin, it's turning, it's making a magnetic moment. You can see if you align many of the spins, you can have a permanent magnetism. It's connected to this 0-point energy, this photon force field, and on the right you can see the Feynman diagrams that you can use to actually do the calculations and back this all up. All these pictures together, if you calculate them, then you come to this magnetic moment of the electron that I was explaining. So, I already stressed why I think it's important. I like magnetic motors. I think it's a great concept, and I think with this, arguments that I brought here, you can understand that it's very valid and connected to modern physics, that you can use these magnetic motors and so forth, and they could be actually harnessing 0-point energy. So,
what other large round object spins, chat? How about like the Earth, right? The Earth is spinning. Why is it that Pluto, a planet that's super, super, super far away on the edge of the solar system, right? We got our solar system, our Pluto's way out here. Why is it that Pluto has geologic activity? When we imaged Pluto, we expected Pluto to be non-geologically active because we thought there's no way it can be active. It's a cold celestial dwarf at the far reaches of the solar system. And when we got there, we saw this light. We saw geologic activity. We saw stuff spewing out from the planet. And then we saw this bright light there. And we think, how is that possible? Because the universe is electric. The universe is electric, chat. That's the answer.
So now we are slowly coming to the last phase of the talk. And here you can see, this is actually from Fabrizio Pinto. He came up with a paper on how to actually convert this Casimir force into a motor, into a cyclic engine. And so he proposed this. And Jordan McClay, he kind of calculated in papers he published for the NASA Breakthrough Propulsion project, that how much energy can you actually get out of a Casimir thing. Well, Jordan McClay, he came up with this. So if you can kind of convert, have like a negative Casimir effect, you can make a few changes, and these changes are these grooves in the blue sheet. And if you have a certain type of groove, you can convert or reverse the Casimir force and make it repellent.
Okay, chat. Wow, there's Robert Forward right there. Robert Forward wrote a paper where he tried to argue that we can make a perpetual Casimir force that can extract energy perpetually without breaking the laws of thermodynamics. Now, look at this diagram right here. Look at that diagram. What did he make? He almost made like a little trampoline. We're just going to have it oscillate. We're going to have it oscillate. So we take the same idea as our tuning fork, and we put it next to a plate. In this case, we turn it sideways, and now we've got our thing that's oscillating here. And now we're potentially, like, we make a little, let's say our trampoline, right? We've got our trampoline, and we just it constantly oscillates. And we use that to extract energy from the 0-point fluctuations using the Casimir force. That's genius. That's genius. Remember when I said it's an engineering problem? There's an engineering answer. I don't know if this is the answer, but this is a genius answer, right? And this can be done on the microscopic scale. You can do this on a scale that's smaller than my nail here. And that's what I love about it, right? You create this oscillation, you can scale it down, and then you can have this situation where the Casimir force is producing work, usable work for us perpetually. Pretty cool, right? Because now we don't have to worry about separating the plates anymore. We create a trampoline effect. And then even if we extract that energy, it's still going to keep going. Still going to keep going.
So he was envisioning a little engine with this. So also Morey, he mentioned this very important paper where he kind of shows that you can actually use this zero-point energy and make heat or any usable force out of it without violating any physical laws. So
Chat, I didn't even watch this part. There's Hal Puthoff right there. Hal Puthoff is right there. That's his picture. This paper is called Extracting Energy and Heat from the Vacuum. And this is the one he wrote with Daniel C. Cole, 1993. This is the paper that shows extracting energy from the vacuum does not violate the laws of thermodynamics. If you guys saw my Twitter post yesterday where I went through the Wikipedia edits on Hal Puthoff's paper, this idiot, like Hobgoblin or whatever the hell his stupid ass name is, doesn't understand zero-point energy, and he's trying to claim that this is pseudoscience. And Hal Puthoff literally replied himself and said, here's the papers. This was one of the papers. I read this paper. I've read all of Hal Puthoff's papers. And this one shows that it does not violate the laws of thermodynamics at all. It does not violate the laws of thermodynamics. Welcome to suppression, chat. This is how it works.
By physics, we are allowed to take it and use it. Here is a calculation table where you can see effective area and smallest separation, and you can see how many joules you can squeeze out of a capacitor like Casimir regime. And you can see that in like the upper left, that's like what we can do today, like 100 nanometer separation. That's quite easy to do. 1 nanometer is pretty difficult, and 1 femtometer is pretty not possible easily. That's like the separation of the size of a nuclei. So anyhow, the upper left is what you can do today, but the joules are not very many. It's not much that you can get out of it. So what we have to do is we have to come to smaller separation and larger areas to actually do something with it. This also is important for us. This is a graph showing how the Casimir force changes if you take temperature and the real metal into account. Real metal means that most, like here in this case, copper and gold, and any other metal, they become transparent if you go to very high frequencies. Like gold is already yellow, copper is already a little red, most metals are grayish, so this is just exactly that curve on the left. So that means that if a field comes to, and the frequency gets smaller and smaller, and the energy of the photon gets higher and higher, they start flying through the metal. If you have like a very high energy photon, it will just fly through the metal. While if it's like a radio frequency, if you have a metal, it will be just repelled like a mirror. Okay? So, and that changing area is just in around.
Whoa, chat. Did he just explain why you can't shield gravity? Wow. He just said basically with the right frequency, you can just go through a solid object. This is, let's call this cough syrup. Sorry. If you have the right frequency, your photon can go straight through it. Without the right frequency, it's going to bounce off. That seems like this could explain tunneling as well, quantum tunneling as well, which is this idea that if I take a semiconductor and I have an insulator and then another semiconductor, I can just go straight through the insulator to the other side.
On the visible spectrum, so that's why some metals have a color. So anyhow, that means for us that if you have the higher frequencies, which I told you in the beginning, has more juice, has much more energy in it, well, in that area, the metals are transparent. So even if you get them closer and closer, it won't help you because they're transparent. They're not even there for the photons. On the other hand, temperature helps a little bit and it goes up, meaning there is a lot more photons in this area here, 10 microns. This is a typical infrared region. So if we take into account that we don't have zero temperature, like 0-point energy, if we have temperature, we have more photons, so the effect is more. That is what this graph shows. So one approach would be, this is more like a physical approach, is if we can move away from real metals, if we can go to free electron structures, like plasmas.
He said the magic word, chat. Can we go to free electron structures like plasmas? We finally got there, right? Wow. Now we're starting to see why is it a ball of plasma? Because it's a free electron structure. Now you can get to a situation where you can manipulate the electrons in a way that you cannot with a solid structure. Plasma, chat. Exotic vacuum objects. Ken Shoulders' work. Bingo. Now we see why the orbs in the MH370 videos are plasma orbs. All of this science is connected to 0-point energy. And once you get to your plasma orb, now you can create your asymmetry that we're looking for, where we have our electrons clustered together, and we can create a dipole, and we can potentially control the electrons with magnetism to a very specific degree. Wow. Chat. Wow. This is where it's like, holy shit. There's no way. It's impossible for the videos to be fake, right? Like, you wouldn't imagine having some fake videos and it's like they lead you down this 0-point energy. You can explain why we're looking at the heat signatures in the orbs, why the orbs themselves are balls of plasma that are there. And you've got all this scientific knowledge going back 100 years that explain it. The answer is the videos are real. This science is real. And the world is just behind, like just ignoring it. And Hal Puthoff knows all of this. There's no possible way Hal Puthoff doesn't know all of this. Hal Puthoff knows the videos are real. He knows the science is real. And anybody that's talked to Hal Puthoff must also know it as well. So who's talked to Hal Puthoff? Lou Elizondo. Lou Elizondo has. So why, when people ask, why do you come down so hard on Lou Elizondo? Because I know he's fucking lying. I know he's lying. This guy was briefed in skiffs by Hal Puthoff on how all this stuff works. Guys, for the record, what I'm teaching you right now, the stuff we're looking at right now on this live stream, if I was telling this to senators and congressmen, it would have to be done in a skiff, in a private, secure location. That's how serious this science is. So when you ask, like, how do they suppress and hide this science? This is how and why. You are listening to it right now.
Then you can bring them closer together. You can make smaller separations and move on in the table to the higher numbers. So this would be one possibility of actually moving in the direction of having a 0-point energy device. So that's why I highlighted these areas. If we get really small, then the energy gets really high. But I think there's another way which is very interesting.
So what did he just say there? Basically, we're trying to figure out a way to how do we get, because we figured out how it works. We figured out how the Casimir effect works. We want to get the electrons as close together as possible. And he's saying, well, if we do it with plasma, we can control them at the nanoscales. And so now we know the plasma orbs are producing free energy. They're abusing the Casimir effect. They're abusing it in a coherent plasma. And this is the logical medium that you would use. You don't want two plates. We want a plasma to manipulate them. And there you go. What this all boils down to, the MH370 videos, free energy. We live in either Fallout or Star Trek.
And I hope not too far out for this audience, is that there is quite a few evidence that consciousness, that the mind is actually able to influence random processes. Like you can read up in the peer labs and others, they have been studying this. So the thing here is, if we apply this and if we can use the mind to kind of have one region with a little bit more zero-point energy activity and one region with, let's say, 0.1% less activity, it's a much larger number than any electron structure can ever do, okay? 0.1% of the zero-point energy is really a lot of energy. So this is a graph from the peer lab and so forth, and showing that you can change the green line is normal probability. The red line is you've changed it in one direction, and the blue line is you changed in the other direction.
So why did Hal Puthoff look into remote viewing? Because Hal Puthoff understood this. He understood that the mind itself can change the random fluctuations of the zero-point energy field. And if it can do that, you can manipulate random chance. And even if you change it a tiny little bit, you are still manipulating reality at that point. And this is the part where the difference between fake remote viewing is that people think that they can see exactly what would happen. The truth is, nobody is out there predicting the future, but you don't need to be 100% correct. You only need to be 51% correct, more than average. If you're even a slight bit more than average, it proves that we're able to manipulate reality with our mind. And so then what do? Just like where, I don't know if you guys have heard this, if you take like 1,000 people and have them guess how many gumballs are in a gumball machine, and you take all the numbers and you average them out, you're going to get very close to the real answer. But how is that possible? That shouldn't be possible. And the reason is because we can actually manipulate, even on a small scale. If you take just a 1% chance, but then you have a bunch of people do it and you average them all out, then you're increasing that 1% chance. It's like increasing the chance of being correct, essentially. More and more and more and more. This is why Hal Puthoff was researching remote viewing. And of course, how do you discredit him? You discredit him because you say, oh, people say they've got psychic powers and everybody's predicting the future. This is why I don't listen to the psychics who say they're seeing the future or whatever. It's not that they're necessarily wrong. It's that they're only 51% correct. They're not 100% correct. They're 51% correct. I don't want one person to tell me. I want 100 people. And then I want to average it together. And then maybe I will get the answer, right? So it's not that remote viewing is not real. It's that you can't do it with just like one person. Then you might say, well, one person, I have more psychic powers than somebody else. Maybe I don't know. I don't care. There you go.
So they found out that 0.1% of shifting is quite possible, and like I explained, for us, even much less than 0.1% would still be a large number. Now, how?
So he just said what I said, even 0.1%. So even if it's 50.1%, even that is a huge number. This is what the skeptics don't understand, is that any deviation from 50% proves that there is some connection between consciousness and reality. It doesn't need to be, I don't need to be correct 100% of the time or 90% of the time. I just need to be correct 0.1%, 50.1% of the time, even less than that, frankly.
Is that this is the calculation. So I'm already taking very conservative numbers here, because here I'm taking the cutoff frequency is kind of important in this calculation. Means where do you actually stop? I said high frequency, but what is the highest possible frequency? So what I did is I took the 10 to the power 20 EV. This is like cosmic rays that we still observe, high-powered stuff coming from the universe. So, and if you calculate the frequency from that, you come 10 to the power 32 hertz. So I put that into the integral, and then you come 10 to the power 66 joules, which is a lot. And there are other ways of doing it. There's something called the Planck length, so meaning the smallest possible length. It's all debatable where the cutoff is, but definitely 10 to the power 20 EV is observable, so that frequency really exists. And you can see that 0.1% of 5 to the 10 to the 66 is 10 to the 63, so it's still an enormous amount of energy. And that's why I think that this using intention and consciousness is really a key to any of these things. And some people call it the inventor effect, that only when the inventor is there, it will work. Well, actually, here you can see there's something to it. It's possible that this is part of the working of these devices. From the pure physics of it, there's a high likelihood that it is so. So anyhow, this was also mentioned that it's connected with gravity and mass, but that you can take the 0-point energy and actually change gravity with it.
Do you guys see what the fuck is on the screen right now? Gravity as a 0-point energy effect, first formulated by Sakharov. Important articles by Hal Puthoff. Idea, the jitter, the Zitter-Buegang of charged particles and 0-point energy leads to resistance, leads to inertia, and induced van der Waals-like attraction, gravitation. There you go. When you guys think I'm just making this up, I haven't even seen, the first time I saw this was like a week ago. And I'm on podcast talking about gravity as 0-point fluctuation force and Sakharov months ago, right? There you go, guys. Turns out that another physics professor, PhD, was saying this 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, potentially. So here you go. Free energy is real. Gravity is explained by 0-point energy fluctuations. Casimir effect is the key. That's the linchpin that proves it. He also just explained how this is connected to remote viewing and consciousness, and he calculated the energy density as 10 to the 67. 10 to the 67. The difference between this, the energy density that classic physics thinks is out there, is like 10 to the minus 15 or something like that. Minus 15. The energy density that we think is out there is like 10 to the 100, positive 100 orders of magnitude. That's 100 zeros. So really, when we talk about the vacuum catastrophe, it's such a huge, huge difference between what classical physics understands versus what we can tell from quantum mechanics. And this is why when we try to unify them, we have to decide, is it zero or is it this massive number? And the answer is it's the massive number. The moment we understand the massive number is the truth, everything falls into place. We can have a impulse drive. We can have warp drive. We can have wormholes. We can have free energy. We can transmute elements, and we can pull elements directly out of the vacuum. Directly out of the vacuum.
This is the next level. And now we come to a few technologies that claim themselves that they are related to 0-point energy, or where I think they are related. Now, if you heard Maury's talk, you already heard a lot about Ken Shoulders and his 0-point and his charge cluster. And I personally think that it's very much related to the 0-point energy.
Ken Shoulders thought it was related to 0-point energy too. Why did he call it exotic vacuum object? Because Ken Shoulders knew that the plasma was coherent energy directly out of the ether. Ken Shoulders knew. That's literally why he calls it exotic vacuum object. Taryn here just mentioned Ken Shoulders, and next thing you know, Thorsten Ludwig is mentioning Ken Shoulders as well. You know who also was connected to Ken Shoulders? Harold Puthoff. What a coincidence. Harold Puthoff is connected to sonoluminescence, Ken Shoulders, connected to 0-point energy as a gravity-induced effect. Guys, what the F, man? Someone needs to get Hal Puthoff on the line. So when Hal Puthoff is sitting there, and I'm gonna show this, guys, because I can't believe, like, people have been trying to discredit this guy, and I'm just sitting here going,
Ask yourself, what Pandora's box would a new physical insight potentially open? The role of aerospace companies as holders of potentially basic scientific knowledge not shared with the academic world. Is it possible? It seems very wrong to me.
Maybe wrong, but it's true.
I fucking love Harold Puthoff, guys. I don't even care if he's hiding this technology. This guy is cold-blooded. Cold-blooded. He's an OG. Eric Weinstein, like, do you think that aerospace companies are hiding physics? That seems really messed up to me. He's like, yeah, it's true, though. Like he's ordering lunch. He doesn't give a shit.
It is true. You believe it's true.
You believe it's true?
Yeah, I know it's true.
Yeah, I know it's true. Yeah, he's just chilling. Yeah, I know it's true. I love this guy, man. I love this guy. I hope he lives to be 150. I love this man. Okay, let's go back.
It's charges, it's electrons in a small structure running through space, so all ideal for harnessing zero-point energy. And we heard about Myers. These are small discharges. I totally agree with Morey that these discharges are very likely to harness zero-point energy.
Sorry, one thing. Eric Davis is literally like Hal Puthoff's understudy, by the way. Eric Davis is just like Hal Puthoff's understudy. Hal Puthoff's like 85 or 89 or something like that. He's old. And Eric Davis is like in his 60s. So you got to realize there's like a 30-year age gap between these guys, right? So there you go. And then no, Stanley Meyer is getting discussed right here. Stanley Meyer with his water-powered car. Stanley Meyer also got discredited. So when people are like, Ashton, just show the free energy device. I'm like, well, what about Stanley Meyer, John Cyril, John Bendini, John Hutchinson? What about the guys who are looking at sonoluminescence? What about Ken Shoulders? It's not a matter of showing it. The public's too stupid to understand it. You have to explain the science to them and go, look, man, watch my live stream tonight. I just showed it to you for like 2 hours. If you still don't get it after this live stream, I don't know what to tell you.
By the whole setup, the whole regime, very, very likely. So here are pictures from the patents from Myers, and you've heard a lot in Morey's talk. I'm assuming that most of you have heard it. So this is the Rossi device, the cold fusion, for me, very much related. Well, Rossi himself said, like 2 months ago, that he's not really sure what's happening in his device. Well, what you see here is a lot of little boxes, and in the boxes there's a...
Oh, this is my favorite. A lot of these guys don't even know how their own shit is working. They're like, I don't even know how this is working. I'm just getting free energy out. Like, I emailed David Greer at NYU with his negative energy laser that's having a repulsive effect instead of an attractive, or an attractive effect instead of a repulsive effect. And I go, hey, man, I think you might have developed a negative energy laser. And he's like, no, I don't know how it works. It's just magic. He literally emailed me back. I could read the email off to you guys. It's unbelievable. PhD professors don't even know how their own shit works, because they don't understand that zero-point energy is the answer. And I'm sitting here as a normie guy, a YouTube streamer and high-tech influencer, whatever you want to call me, and I'm explaining it to them like, dude, you've invented a laser that's using negative energy. You can tell because it's giving you the effects of negative mass and negative energy. And they're just like, no, it's just magic. Jesus Christ, chat. We are cooked. We are cooked as a species, chat.
Nickel nanopowder, and with certain hydrogen and heat, somehow you get a lot more heat out. So that's called low energy nuclear reactions, or it used to be called cold fusion. For several reasons, people changed the names, and they rather named it chemical-assisted nuclear reactions or low-energy nuclear reactions, trying to avoid the heavy pounding of the hot fusion. Okay, only a few more pictures. So anyhow, here's, well, I could tell you how it works, but okay, let's skip that. What can I do?
Bro, I can't believe they skipped shit. I would give this guy, if he wants to talk for 5 hours, let this man talk for 5 hours. He skipped over more free energy devices. Dude, this is what I'm talking about, though. I'll just tell you guys, though. John Bendini, John Cyril, Tom Bearden, like these guys, John Hutchinson, they all figured this out. They all get discredited. If the stuff was fake, there would not be a Tom Bearden or a John Bendini or a Stanley Meyer. There wouldn't be any of these guys. They wouldn't exist. They wouldn't be able to find these effects. So I don't know for a fact that they all work, but I know some of them do. And some of them, specifically John Bendini, his stuff is all available online. You can find schematics, electrical circuits, everything that you need, videos. So when people say, hey, just show it, I just say, dude, just look up John Bendini's shit. It's all out there. You can find it for yourself. The issue is understanding how the physics is possible. Once you understand how the physics is possible, because free space is not empty, remember, not empty, everything falls into place. Simple as that.
Well, anyhow, these in the parallel session, you could see the Aquapole device, and in a parallel session next to this session also, you can see how the time waver works, and I think it's very much related. This is the Tesla car and witnesses of that, and we're working together with this Energy Research Institute and Professor Beck, who's backing up this research and the free energy devices. And Wetzers is also interested in these things. It's in northern Netherlands. And University of Stuttgart is active making devices out of critical Casimir forces. And Paris is working on it. The European Union spends a lot of money on Casimir force and how to, you see, nanoscales machines exploiting the Casimir force. So there's actually a big European program to kind of find out how can we make nano machines working with the Casimir force. I skip this. This is what I'm working on right now, trapping ions and doing measurements on single electrons. I'm setting this up in the lab here with magnetic fields and all sorts of things. This is an ion trap that we are building. Here you can see another one was already ready, not made in our lab, and there you can store single ions. This is a single ion in fluorescence, and you can do very fine-tuned experiments with it, and we hope to actually see what I'm talking about on a single.
Okay, I think that's good enough. I mean, there's only like a minute left, so he just goes over some examples there. I want to address some of the questions that are in there. There are common questions that I hear you guys ask. A lot of people ask, how do I learn this? Guys, I want you to realize something. I literally only started researching electrical engineering and physics in November of last year. So it's September right now, so that's only at the most 10 months. 10 months, I've gone from knowing practically nothing to where I'm at right now. Now, I'm not going to say it didn't take effort. I've spent basically, I have a 9-to-5 job. After the 9-to-5 job, I read scientific papers. It helps when you have seen the answers, which is the MH370 videos, because then you know what to look for. But if you research the right people, I mostly started by watching Tom Bearden's videos online. There's dozens of them. And then you start to understand the concept. Realize that everything Tom Bearden is saying about the science is correct. When he starts talking about Chernobyl and the Challenger and this conspiracy stuff, maybe not correct. Who cares? Just focus on the hard science. If you follow the scientists that I am referencing and read their stuff, the cheat sheet is Hal Puthoff's stuff is all correct. Hal Puthoff is over the mark. So you read his stuff and then Google all the things that you don't understand. Every time I didn't understand a concept, I Googled it. I tried to understand it. I watched explainer videos about it. You can figure it out yourself. It doesn't take a lifetime of information to figure this stuff out. If I can figure it out, you guys can figure it out as well. Maybe I'm good at intuition, but I'm telling you guys who the people are who are legit. Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, Tom Bearden, John Bedini for sure, probably John Cyril and John Hutchinson as well, guys. So whatever they were looking at, find everything related to their work. Look through my Twitter profile. You can search specific names. You're going to find videos, links to all this stuff, etc. Why I don't monetize it? Why is there no Ashton University, shirts or what have you? The reason I could monetize way more. I could have I don't even have subscriptions on my YouTube set up. I could have subscriptions on my YouTube. I could have subscriptions on my Twitter profile. Basically, everybody else who's as big as I am, influencer-wise, has all of this stuff set up to get money from people. The reason why I don't do that is I'm trying to keep this as above board as possible because I know that the people that are trying to hide this are looking for any avenue to discredit me. Any avenue. They want to say, Ashton's a grifter who's just lying for money. And so they want me to set up subscriptions. They want me to set up t-shirts and monetize all the stuff that's out there. And the reason why I don't do it is because I don't have to. Because I have a real job that pays me over $100,000 a year. And I love that job, to be perfectly honest with you. The only reason why I'm thinking about quitting that job is because I love this even more. But I could never make as much money doing this as I do at my real job. That's just the truth for you guys. That's the reason why I don't go full monetization on this. That's also the reason why I'm not on TikTok and Instagram posting all the videos, although I will be posting them there mostly just for reach. I also noticed that Mick West, debunker extraordinaire, has been talking about warp drive because he doesn't understand how warp drive works. Well, just tell Mick West to watch my videos and he'll understand exactly how warp drive works. Ask any debunker to watch my videos on negative energy. And when we talk about this stuff, even watch the video today and I explained it to them. Warp drive is absolutely possible. And the moment we understand that the vacuum is not empty, it becomes obvious. What is negative energy? This. Just going down from the equilibrium. Just removing the 0-point fluctuations from in front of us. And it's possible. Truthfully, I wish the best for people like Mick West and other debunkers. It can't be easy to realize that your life is a lie and that everything you believe to be true and all the authority that's out there have been lying to you. That cannot be easy to accept. It really can't. But they're going to have to deal with that in some way they want. And when they go to the next life, they're going to have to square up all the bullshit, all the lies they told the world with God. They're going to have to square that up with the big man up there. And I'm going to drag the shit out of all of those people like Mick West and everybody in the Skeptical Inquirer, all these fucking quacks and shit that were trying to discredit Hal Puthoff. I'm going to drag those people for the rest of their lives. I'm going to make sure that the world knows that they were enemies of humanity that tried to prevent us from going to the Star Trek world. And that's what they deserve. That's what they deserve for how they've acted throughout life. They deserve to be the people that are ridiculed for the rest of all of time. And if you don't want to be one of those people, then don't be a dickhead who's trying to pretend like you know better than everybody else when you don't. When you don't. Open your mind. Don't be a closed-minded fool. Be a free thinker and think for yourself. Do not let the authority tell you what to think. That is how they control us. Free energy is possible. Warp drives, wormholes are possible, and we will achieve Star Trek in our lifetime. Thank you, MH370X. I love you guys, and we'll talk on Friday about free energy. Have a great night, everybody. Peace.
In the fields where the skies are wide, talking about a journey through the cosmic ride. Einstein and Thorne, they set the stage for a trip through time across the space age. Wormholes connect distant exit points in space, traversable paths to a far-off place. No black holes pull, no crushing weight, just a cosmic tunnel to a distant gate.
Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow. We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Bowling 777 through a wormhole flow.
Exotic matter, negative energy's the key to stabilize the wormhole for you and me. Quantum vacuum squeezed so tight, creating conditions for this wondrous flight. Static fields and lasers in the lab they play, generating forces in a new kind of way. Gravitational squeezing, Casimir's force, negative zones we need to stay the course.
Talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow.
Thin shell formalism plates so fine, spherical geometry we realign, energy conditions that we must defy. For a stable wormhole, let's give it a try. Unknown forces balancing the plates, creating the throat, open the gates, from Earth to the stars in a single bound. A shortcut through space profound. Engineers and dreamers hold the key to future worlds and what we could be. With science in hand, we forge ahead through the cosmic paths that we now tread.
We're talking wormholes, stargates, negative energy, travel through the cosmos, it's our destiny. MH370, where did it go? Boeing 777 through a wormhole flow.
From the fields to the stars, we break the chains. Understanding the universe, we make the gains. Lil Hula Crunk shines, bringing truth to light. Through his music, we'll explore the night. With wormholes and stargates, our path is clear. Exploring the cosmos.